Good afternoon. I'm Robin Strongen, and I run the healthcare work for National Consumers League. And part of the work that we do in healthcare that we're very proud of, actually, since 2011, is a program called Script Your Future, which is a national education campaign that addresses the challenges around the topic of medication adherence. And that's a tricky one. And so we don't do it alone. Through Script Your Future, we work with schools of pharmacy across the country. And a flagship component of this initiative is something we lovingly refer to as our Script Your Future Challenge. And as I said, we work with schools of pharmacy across the country, and they work with members of their very local community to identify some specific areas of challenge within medication adherence, and then to offer some resources and solutions that we then share with the whole community. And one of the key components of this is to be able to share some expert learning, some resources, materials, particularly on areas of interest. One of which maybe I wouldn't say it's reached a fever pitch, but it's certainly been in the news quite a bit. It even got a shout out in the State of the Union, is the whole issue or series of issues around the topic of biosimilars. And before I introduce our expert panels to do a deeper dive into this, I just want to mention three things about today's program. First is none of what we're going to be sharing is medical advice. This is all publicly available educational resource material, which we will be recording. We have a set of slides, which we will also be uploading along with the recording to scriptyourfuture.org, and then we will be sharing it. And for those in the audience, you can share it as well. And lastly, I would just mention that on May 7th, at 2 o'clock, I will be in conversation with a couple of our current speakers talking about this issue. But while today's program is really geared and designed for pharmacy students, pharmacists, those in the healthcare field, of course, consumers are welcome and encouraged to listen in as well. The one on May 7th, the podcast will be framed more specifically for consumers. We know there are a lot of questions that consumers and their caregivers, patients have. And so we're going to take the information from today and then take it in a little bit of a different direction later on next month. But in order to get things going, I am going to introduce our three experts. We are very fortunate to have two of them from the Food and Drug Administration and one from Biosimilars Forum. Today with us, we have Sarah Eikenberry, who is Senior Communications Advisor in the Office of Therapeutic Biologics and Biosimilars at FDA's CDER, which is Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And Sarah is basically provides communication advice and support to the senior leadership and those in the agency all around strategic priorities, initiatives, and educational information, fortunately for us, on biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilar products. And Sarah received her Master's of Arts in Communication from Johns Hopkins University. And she is joined by her colleague, Shelley Skabinski, who has a PharmD for all you pharmacy students listening. She's a project coordinator in the same office as Sarah, which is OTBB in FDA's CDER. And there will be a test at the end to make sure you know all those acronyms. And as a member of OTBB's policy staff, Shelley works on policy and regulatory issues and is the lead for the large-scale projects such as FDA's Purple Book, which we are going to be hearing a lot more about in today's presentation. And just for those of you who may not be familiar, that is really the quintessential database of licensed biological products. Shelley graduated as a doctor of pharmacy from the Bernard J. Dunn School of Pharmacy at Shenandoah University. And then rounding out our expert panel today, we have Julie Reed, who's executive director of the Biosimilars Forum. And Julie, I believe you've been there almost a decade now, actually one of the original co-founders, I believe. And Julie brings more than 3 decades of very senior level healthcare health sector experience, leading global corporate positions in the life sciences, and really one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on this subject. So we are just delighted on behalf of all of us at National Consumers League to have the three of you be able to share your expertise with our audience. And the way we're going to work today is I'm going to ask you a quick question, Julie, just to kick things off, and then I'm going to turn it over to our guests from FDA, and then we'll come back and round out with some wrap up and some policy takeaways. But before we do the deeper dive into definitions and safety and efficacy and all of the good work of FDA, Julie, what are some of the key takeaways, sort of big picture, when you think biosimilars that you think really important for someone in a pharmacy school, people listening, 2 or 3 key takeaways when you want to talk about biosimilars that you hope people keep in mind?
Thank you, Robin, and a special thanks to you and the National Consumer League for putting on these very important webinars and programs, especially, and a special thanks to our FDA colleagues who are here today and have been with us through this journey of getting the biosimilar marketplace and getting biosimilars developed and approved at the FDA. It's been an incredible experience. And for this audience, for students, especially pharmacy students or any healthcare professional, I think one of the most important things is that biosimilars are safe and they are effective. And you will hear that from both Shelley and Sarah. But we also have countless, over billions of patient days over the past 10 years of patients using biosimilars in pretty much every country around the world. And biosimilars are increasing access and they're decreasing cost for patients. And that is so, so important. So if you feel today you're hearing about something new, please at any time reach out to any of the people on this call. We can always provide you with an ongoing data and ongoing publications and things like that. And again, I just want to thank everyone who's listening, and thank you, Robin, again for doing this important program. So thank you.
Great, our pleasure. And I want to turn it over now to Shelley to kick off our next slide.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks, Julie, for the intro. I'm sure you'll hear me say the similar things throughout. And, you know, thanks again for having us talk today and for the opportunity to be here to talk about biosimilars. Next slide, please. So before we get into details about biosimilars, I wanted to review some disease states that biosimilars treat. First, we have chronic skin conditions. This would be psoriasis and things like that. Chronic bowel diseases like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, diabetes, macular degeneration, bone and kidney conditions, some cancers, and also supportive care for cancer treatments and multiple sclerosis. Next slide, please. Here's a snapshot of the biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars that we have approved in the US to date. We have 48 biosimilars approved to 15 different reference products. There are currently 9 of these biosimilars that are approved as interchangeable biosimilars, and 38 of these products are marketed. These numbers change all the time, so this is accurate as of March 11th. And next slide, please. Thanks. So again, before we get into the details about biosimilars, it is definitely helpful to understand more about biological medications in general. So most biologics are made from living sources, made in living sources, or made from living sources. These would be cells or microorganisms such as bacteria or yeast. Biologic medications are more complex than small molecule drugs, and they're more complicated to make because they're derived from natural sources. Biologics are also much larger molecules, than small molecule drugs. And you can see this in the photo or the picture that we have on this slide, where we are comparing a monoclonal antibody to a aspirin molecule. Biologics range in size from insulin, which is relatively small for a biological product, up to monoclonal antibodies, which are larger. Monoclonal antibodies treat a range of conditions, but you may have heard a lot about them in the news about treating COVID-19. Other medications that are monoclonal antibodies that you commonly hear about are Humira, Actemra, Neupogen, and a lot of other biologics, including some biosimilars, are also monoclonal antibodies. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines key definitions in the law that governs biosimilars, which is the Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act, or the BPCI Act. So we'll go through this slide about the definitions, and then we'll break it down in the next slide. A reference product is the single biological product already approved by the FDA against which a proposed biosimilar product is compared. A biosimilar product needs to meet two key standards. It must be highly similar to and have no clinically meaningful differences from its reference product. An interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar product, meaning that it meets those two standards of biosimilarity, highly similar and no clinically meaningful differences, and it is expected to produce the same clinical result as the reference product in any given patient. Also, switching between the interchangeable biosimilar and the reference product would not increase the risk for safety risks or decrease the effectiveness compared to using the reference product without switching. Interchangeability is mostly relevant for pharmacy substitution, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. So to break that down a little bit more, a biosimilar is an FDA-approved biological medication that is highly similar and not identical to a reference biologic medication. If you hear reference biologic medication, you will also hear the same, sorry, but it's not identical to a reference biologic medication. You'll also hear the reference biologic medication called a reference product, or it's sometimes referred to as the brand product or the original biologic. So biosimilars have no clinically meaningful differences from the reference product. This means you can expect the same safety and effectiveness from the biosimilar over the course of treatment as you would the reference product. Biosimilars are made from the same types of sources, those living cells or microorganisms, and they are just as safe and effective as the reference product. They provide the same treatment benefits, they're given at the same strength and dosage, and they are not expected to cause new or worsening side effects. Next slide. So this slide shows a very high-level overview of the general requirements for data FDA reviews to determine a product is biosimilar to its reference product. Comparisons include the molecular structures, the bioactivity, which means to make sure that the medication works as it is intended to work, and ensuring the product has no impurities. FDA also looks at clinical data, such as pharmacokinetic data, which, as you know, shows how a medication is absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated by the body. And FDA makes sure that this process for the proposed biosimilar is the same as what has been established by the reference product. Next slide. So why aren't biosimilars identical to their reference products? It's because most biologics are made from living sources. So it's normal for biosimilars and reference products to have minor differences between batches of the same medication. Cells can make exact copies of a protein, but other add-ons and changes occur that results in different versions of the molecule. This is what we call inherent variation. So there are millions of slightly different versions of the same protein or antibody per dose or batch. One way you can think about this is like a recipe for making bread. So all biologic medications, including biosimilars, are similar to loaves of bread if they were made from the exact same recipe, which includes yeast, a living source. No one loaf is the exact copy of another, but they are all the same type of bread. This same concept is true for biologics. Each batch of a biologic medication is made with a mix of ingredients, which includes the living source. And because living sources have slight variations, each batch is not an exact copy, but each batch provides the same treatment benefits. Next slide. So how are biosimilars like generic drugs? Biosimilars are like generics in some ways in that both medications are compared to original or brand product in an abbreviated approval pathway. So they are both versions of previously FDA approved medications, and they may offer more affordable treatment options to patients. The reason why one is called a biosimilar and then the other is called a generic is because they are approved through different regulatory pathways at the FDA. But they both avoid duplicating certain costly clinical trials. Both biosimilars and generics go through a rigorous review process, but there are differences between them. One such difference is that biosimilars and reference products are generally derived from natural living sources, and generics and the brand name drugs are made from chemical compounds. Chemical compounds can be more easily copied, whereas natural and living sources cannot be exactly copied, like we talked about with the inherent variation. Although there are some less complicated biologics that can be exactly copied. So the information needed to demonstrate that a biologic is biosimilar to a reference product can be much more extensive than what is needed for a generic to prove that they are a copy of a brand. Next slide. Now let's go over some information about interchangeable biosimilars versus biosimilars, because that can be a confusing area. An interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar, and it may be substituted without consulting the prescribing physician because it meets those additional requirements related to automatic substitution. This is also subject to state pharmacy laws. And depending on those state pharmacy laws, this would work similar to how generics are dispensed at a pharmacy. So you would get your prescription from your doctor and you would go to the pharmacy to fill it. The pharmacist could give you the brand or original biologic, or they could give you the interchangeable biosimilar. However, it's good to remember that not all biosimilars are interchangeable, and the companies that get biologics approved, they have to request approval as a interchangeable biosimilar specifically. Next slide. So let's talk about more differences between biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars. Scientifically and clinically, there's no difference. Biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars both meet FDA's requirements to demonstrate that they are highly similar to and have no clinically meaningful differences from their reference product. The law that governs biosimilars requires that if a biosimilar is automatically substituted at the pharmacy, that it must be determined to be an interchangeable biosimilar. Therefore, an interchangeable biosimilar meets additional requirements related to the potential for pharmacy-level substitution or automatic substitution, as we've said in previous slides. There are many reasons why a company may not seek an interchangeable status. Those could be related to their own business reasons or because a medication is administered at a hospital or in an outpatient clinic and it's not normally dispensed at a local pharmacy. So now you may wonder, with all of this information, should you wait for a biosimilar to be approved as interchangeable to use it? The answer is no. Both biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars meet the same high standard of biosimilarity for FDA approval, and both are as safe and effective as their reference product. Biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars can both be used in place of their reference product. So I want to emphasize some key points about using reference, biosimilar, and interchangeable biosimilar products. Patients and providers can be confident in the safety and effectiveness of all biosimilars, like we've said, regardless of if they've been approved as an interchangeable biosimilar. They can all be prescribed in place of the reference product. They can be used in patients who are treatment experienced and treatment naive patients, meaning if the patient has not previously used the reference product. FDA reviews a lot of information to decide whether a biosimilar meets FDA's high approval standards and to ensure that biosimilars are safe and effective treatment options. This includes ensuring that manufacturers show that there are no differences in side effects, including that the side effects of the biosimilar are not more frequent or more severe than those of the reference product. Biosimilars also undergo the same robust quality assessments as their reference products. Next slide. So why would a patient switch to a biosimilar? For one, biologic medications can be very expensive. And if the patient or their doctor or their formulary management program, such as management programs through a hospital, federal or state insurance, or through private insurance, are concerned about cost, they could also consider switching to a biosimilar. In addition, they can be substituted by pharmacists, like we said, depending on state pharmacy laws. Next slide. So the penultimate question, will biosimilars save money? We know that biologics are often very expensive and can be unaffordable for many patients, especially for those using several medications. The goal of biosimilars is to offer more access to treatments at a lower cost. Biosimilars are approved by relying on FDA's finding that the reference product is safe and effective. And as discussed in the previous slides, they don't have to duplicate certain clinical trials that are extremely costly. So biosimilars theoretically cost less to make. The hope is that the lower costs will save patients money and that biosimilars will be covered by more insurance companies. However, FDA does not have input into the cost of drugs, and coverage and reimbursement can depend on many factors, such as insurance plans and formulary coverage. Patients can always learn more about the price of a specific biosimilar by contacting their pharmacy or insurance company. And next slide. Okay, so we will continue and talk about our next section, which is the Purple Book. And I wanted to talk about this as a good resource for biological product information. And before we get into the Purple Book details specifically, I wanted to give a brief intro about different books that you may encounter in your pharmacy career. There could be more that I've forgotten about since pharmacy school, but the ones that come to my mind are pink, yellow, orange, green, and purple. The pink and yellow books are maintained by the CDC, and the orange, green, and purple books are maintained by the FDA. Each FDA book covers a respective product area according to the regulatory framework of the listed products. For example, the orange book covers chemical drug products, the green book covers veterinary medicines, and the purple book covers biological products. And next slide, please. Okay, so the purple book provides the public with a dynamic, accessible, easy to use online search engine with timely information about licensed biological products. It contains information on all FDA products regulated by the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, or CDER, including licensed biosimilars, interchangeables, and their reference products. It also contains information about licensed allergenic, cellular and gene therapy, hematologic, vaccine products that are regulated by the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, or CBER. You can access the database by searching purplebooksearch.fda.gov. Some of the key features that we'll talk about in more depth include the simple and advanced search options, the glossary of terms, links to product labeling, and the ability to search, filter, and sort information depending on your needs. The user guide is a great place to start out with the Purple Book if you are not familiar with it. It is designed to assist all types of users. It's a resource page that provides descriptions and specific instructions for how to navigate and use the available functions on the Purple Book. So the simple search is the default search bar on the Purple Book homepage. This search function is designed for patients and the general public who may be looking for more information about a specific product. And we will follow an example throughout the Purple Book slides to help you navigate through, looking at a specific product. This example we will follow is as you type in the search bar for the non-proprietary name etanercept, and that is labeled as number 1 on this slide. And if we look at number 2 on the slide, that's a link to the advanced search option on the Purple Book, and it's located directly under the simple search box. This function allows you to view additional product information and apply filters to refine your search, and we'll talk about that more in detail in a few seconds. On the left side of the webpage, you can see the list of site navigation pages that's labeled as number 3. The FAQ, the frequently asked questions page, provides you with detailed information on using, navigating, and interpreting the database. The patent list allows you to see patents and patent information provided to FDA for certain licensed biological products. And the Download Purple Book Data feature is a page that contains monthly reports, and those reports include any changes in product data for the selected month, as well as the entire contents of the Purple Book for that month. You can download those files in CSV or Excel formats, and there's a heading on that page that further explains how to interpret the reports. Next slide. Okay, so we'll continue our example from the previous slide, and you can click a product from the auto-populated results list, and that takes you to the simple search results page for your selected product. So here we would have selected Erelzi from the auto-populated results list, which you can see in the heading, simple search results for Erelzi. The simple search results page for any selected product includes all products that share a core name. That means biosimilar, interchangeable, reference, and related biological products. The matching card colors indicate that a biological product is biosimilar to or interchangeable with its reference product. From the results page, you can navigate to advanced search to see all products that share a core name. The navigate to advanced search link is at the top of a simple search page, and here on this slide, it is outlined in green. So if we take a closer look at the product card, which is in the enlarged image on the left side of this slide, it displays a basic set of information that includes product presentation icons and a link to product labeling. And that is 1 and 2 on the slide here. If you hover over the presentation icons, you can see additional information about the product, including the strength, dosage form, route of administration, and product presentations available for that product. When you click on the product labeling link, it takes you to Drugs at FDA for CDER products and the National Library of Medicine's Daily Med website for CBER products. Next slide. So if we were to have clicked on the product card for Erelzi, it takes you to the product details page for Erelzi, which shows you additional information about that specific product. So we're following our example, and you can see the heading says product details for Erelzi. So we'll discuss a few specific pieces of information on this page. You can see here, if you look at number 2 on the slide, that Erelzi is a biosimilar product that's licensed under Section 351K of the PHS Act, which is listed under that license type column. If a BLA were to contain a product that is biosimilar to its reference product, and also one that is interchangeable with its reference product, the license type column would either list 351K biosimilar or 351K interchangeable as appropriate for each line listing. If you look now below the individual product rows, you can see reference product proper name and reference product proprietary name. These fields only appear on the details pages for 351K biosimilar and interchangeable products. Lastly, on this page, the status column listed under number 3 there allows you to see at a glance if an individual product has been discontinued from sale by the manufacturer. Due to recent changes in Purple Book reporting requirements for BLA holders, this field has an increased degree of accuracy for all products across the database. Next slide. So now we'll take a look at the advanced search. As a reminder, you can access the advanced search from the homepage or from a product simple search results page. The advanced search provides comprehensive results for the biological products that you have searched for. The table updates in real time and it displays all products that match any of the terms that you've entered into the search bar. There's a scroll bar at the bottom and the right side of the table, and it allows you to view a large amount of information at one time. If you look at number 1 on this slide, that's the purple navigation icon bar. And this allows you to show or hide data columns based on what information you need for your inquiry. There are 14 default columns and about 14 additional columns that can be selected from the searchable drop-down list. For example, you might want you may want to also view information such as the BLA number, interchangeable approval date, and first interchangeable exclusivity expiration date. The navigation bar at the top also lets you apply additional search filters, export the table data, save and print the page, view the rows in a card view, which changes the orientation of the data, or you can expand the table to a full screen mode. Next slide, please. So on the previous slide, when we were talking about advanced search, I mentioned some interchangeable product information. So I also wanted to show you how interchangeable products appear in the simple search results. As a reminder, when you're looking at a simple search results page, all products that include the same core name, meaning the biosimilar, interchangeable, reference, and related biological products, will appear on the same page. On the left side of the slide, you can see the simple search results for any of the 6 insulin glargine products. The interchangeable products, Semglee and Resviglar, and their reference product Lantus are outlined in green, and the product cards are shown in enlarged images to the right. If you look again to the left, you can see multiple 351A products under the reference product heading. Each has their own product card color. The matching card colors on product details pages indicate that a biological product is biosimilar to or interchangeable with its reference product. So the matching green card colors for Semglee and Resviglar indicate that each one is interchangeable with its reference product, which is Lantus. And next slide. Lastly, for Purple Book, we'll talk about the glossary of terms. You can access the glossary by clicking on the Purple Book glossary link, which is labeled as number 1, which appears at the top of the webpage. The glossary appears as a pop-up on the right side of the webpage, and it includes commonly used terms that we use throughout the site. You can scroll through the list, or you can search for a term at the top of the pop-up. And the purple glossary tab that is shown in number 3 on this slide appears at the bottom right of the page as you navigate through the Purple Book, and that allows you to access the glossary regardless of where you are on the Purple Book. And now I'll pass it over to my colleague, Sarah, to talk about our education resources.
Thanks, Shelley. So I'm going to review some of the available resources FDA has developed to educate about biosimilars. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a snapshot of materials available for healthcare providers, including fact sheets and a list of the free continuing medical education courses that we worked on with Medscape. You can see here there are several courses available on a range of topics, including integrating biosimilars in practice, biosimilars in the real world, and one that I think is particularly helpful for pharmacists is the last one on the list here, putting the patient into perspective. Strategies for educating patients about biosimilars, as oftentimes the pharmacist is the one talking to the patient about their medications, and especially if there's an insurance or coverage change. So the topics covered in the fact sheet seen here are a general overview of biosimilars, the regulatory review and approval process, and interchangeable biosimilars. We also have videos and infographics available for providers. Next slide. So the Biosimilar Curriculum Toolkit is one of our most comprehensive resources that we've developed, and it was designed to help educate students such as yourself in healthcare professional degree programs, pharmacy included. And so the toolkit provides teaching faculty and other interested stakeholders with a variety of educational resources to help them understand, apply, and teach concepts related to biosimilars and interchangeable biosimilars, along with information about the regulatory pathway in the US. And it's a modular toolkit, which is designed to meet a variety of teaching and educational needs and contains foundational as well as more in-depth information by levels. So there's slide decks, discussion questions, case studies, and information sheets that can be used to convey all of the concepts related to biosimilars. In addition to the regulatory framework, stuff about manufacturing and product variability, and comparative clinical studies, along with prescribing biosimilars and interchangeable products. Next slide. This slide shows a snapshot of the patient materials available. So for patients, we also have fact sheets, infographics, and a patient video that can be used to educate patients, or even if you want just a quick overview of something. Next slide. And so to increase availability and accessibility, we also have many patient and provider materials available in several other languages that you can see here on the screen, including Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and more. Next. So this slide has a list of links to the various resources that have been mentioned by Shelley in her part, have been mentioned by me, but this is where you can find a lot of materials. And if you want to take a deeper dive, you certainly can through Drugs at FDA or searching guidances, etc. And one thing that we did not mention in the slide deck, and we meant to, is our research on switching, because there's a lot of concern from healthcare providers and patients alike about switching between biosimilars and reference products. Excuse me. And I just want to highlight that we recently published research in PLOS One called Safety Outcomes When Switching Between Biosimilars and Reference Products, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. And FDA researchers used statistical methods to determine whether there were safety outcome differences between individuals who switched between a biosimilar and reference product and those who did not. And they focused on any statistical differences in the number of deaths, non-fatal serious adverse events, and study discontinuations due to an adverse event. They also examined, excuse me again, immunogenicity and compared immunogenicity events following switchings. And the researchers concluded there were no differences in the risk of death, serious adverse events, or treatment discontinuations between the switch and no switch arms. And so that can provide some additional evidence for patients and healthcare providers that switching between biosimilars and their reference product is not associated with major safety events. And so I just want to thank you very much for your time, and just to visit our website to access the materials. And you can take them and make them your own and share them, with anyone. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, all of you. And before I let everybody go, I do have a question or two that I want to just round out the program with. And I want to start with you, Julie. One thing we didn't hear mentioned, which gets thrown around a lot, particularly if people are seeing the term in the media, in the lay media, is WAC, high WAC, low WAC. And I know that that's very much core to some of the discussions people might hear. Just at a high level, can you explain to our audience what the WAC is and why it's relevant to this discussion? Oh, you're on mute.
Well, obviously, I'm doing good here.
That's
Do my best.
okay.
Yeah, I am not a pharmacist, but I have been, in the industry for a while and everything. But WAC is wholesale acquisition cost, and it is used to describe the cost of the drug. And what we have seen, though, is the wholesale acquisition cost. It's also often list price is used, things like that. What we've seen is over the last, decade is that what is included in a wholesale acquisition cost of a drug has evolved. And in many, many ways, WAC now includes not just the price of the drug from the manufacturer, but the price of the drug from the manufacturer plus the rebate the manufacturer is providing to the PBM, so that the PBM will give that manufacturer and that drug and those patients access to the drug.
Great.
And I think our pharmacy students will see a lot of this when you're practicing pharmacy, of what your patients get to have access to, what medicines they get to have access to, what steps they have to take to get access to the medicine that their physicians prescribe. And unfortunately, that's controlled a lot by pharmacy benefit managers or PBMs. And it's not controlled by the patient or the pharmacy or the physician. So, but WAC is something that everyone will probably encounter, and it has a lot to do with even the sustainability, especially of the independent pharmacies in this country.
That's really helpful to know, Julie, and it is an area that we'll touch on a little bit more on May 7th in the podcast, because, employers get involved, patients through their employers, all of these insurance coverage, pricing, and of course, bringing it back to Script Your Future, people can't adhere to what they can't access. And that's sort of the mantra that we go with, which is why we're arming today's pharmacy students with all of this information, because oftentimes they are the front line for people that are trying desperately to stay adherent, but there's a lot going on out there and they don't know what, it's very hard to navigate. And particularly if you're dealing with a chronic condition, a serious condition, there's a lot of hoops to jump through and you just want to feel good and stay healthy. Shelley, you have recently, a couple of years ago, finished pharmacy school. What looks different to you in the field of biosimilars that you might want to just recommend to your fellow alums these days, particularly about working or watching what's going on at FDA? I don't, maybe different schools aren't as closely aligned with FDA. I don't know how much you knew about FDA when you were in pharmacy school, and here you are, managing the purple book and so on. So, which is an interesting career path, actually.
Yeah, I don't think I learned a lot about FDA or even biosimilars while I was in school. I mean, we certainly learned about biologics, but you don't learn a lot about regulatory pathways or things like that. And there's only so much you can learn in pharmacy school. So
fair enough. That's why we have Sarah, so she can sort of take up the baton from school to communicating with FDA. Yeah, go ahead.
I would encourage students to, if they're interested in regulatory things such as FDA or other agencies that deal with, medications or, any agency is appropriate for healthcare providers to, be interested in, right? So students that are interested in regulatory agencies, I would encourage them to seek out rotations there and internships and experiences to, go toward that path if that's something that, they're passionate about.
Wonderful. And last question to you, Sarah, because I think it ties everything together nicely. The materials at the end of your piece of the presentation, particularly for patients, I mean, obviously pharmacists can share those with patients or direct them. Does it matter where a patient, sort of the site of care, if somebody's inpatient in a hospital, I guess they're getting their medicine there, they don't have to worry about it, but does site of care or service, how does that work in terms of where people should go for information? Does
Well, I
it
think
apply across the board?
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies per the site of care. I mean, obviously, if you're inpatient, you're going to really be relying on your healthcare provider team. And there's, generally a pharmacist on staff that you can ask questions of if you do have questions about your medications. And if you're even aware of like whether or not you get the biosimilar or not, maybe one thing. But I think one of the biggest places that people need to have this information is at the pharmacy. And if they are on medications that they can get directly from, say, your community pharmacy or even a specialty pharmacy, they're the ones that are probably going to have a lot more questions and need the guidance from, potentially the pharmacist if they haven't heard it from their own, prescriber or nurse that they're working with. And so I do think it's very important for pharmacists to understand how to educate patients so they can feel empowered.
Exactly. And that's wonderful. Yeah, because patients have the right to ask their prescriber and say they learned about X, could they have a conversation? And really that's the beauty of Script Your Future, is sharing all of these resources so that people in the community could understand even where to go for help, to figure it out, to know what to ask for. And so in closing, I will follow up separately, Sarah, so we can get a copy of the FDA switching study and use that when we upload all the other resources. It would be great to be able to include that as well. And any other materials that any of our speakers today think would be beneficial to today's pharmacy students, because we know one thing, and that's the evolving role of the pharmacist is really broadening both in depth and breadth, and we're really relying on today and tomorrow's pharmacists in ways that really we haven't done before. And so it's a remarkable amount of information and knowledge that then they are the learned intermediary for the people that we at National Consumers League, the consumers, and by that I mean patients and their caregivers. Really, there's a lot out there, and it's incumbent on us to help educate so that consumers can advocate and figure out with their health team really what the best way that they could, at the end of the day, be adherent to whatever the program is. And so on that note, I want to thank the three of you for your time, your expertise, sharing all the material, and we will make sure to get it up and shared far and wide. And thank you all again for all of the help with Script Your Future, which is scriptyourfuture.org. And I will make sure that the FDA contact and the Biosimilars Forum for more information is made available to anyone who's interested. And May 7th, 2:00 Eastern, we have our podcast. So stay tuned for more. We're not at all done on biosimilars. So thanks everyone for your time.